Hi, everyone. I am public education reporter Adria Walker, and I'm here with education reporter Justin Murphy. Today, we're going to be discussing a story we published on Sunday, and then it ran again on yesterday about the specific challenges of special education with school reopenings. So I'm going to start by asking Justin, what makes special education different?
Actually, I was going to start by asking Adria, if you're the public education reporter and I'm the regular education reporter, who is in charge?
I think we both are.
We both have an interest in special education. Special education is complicated in any setting by its nature, and all the more so in a remote or hybrid setting. And there's a couple specific challenges. First of all, there's a lot of services that some kids get that are like very physically intensive, that require actual manipulation. So kids need occupational or physical therapy, and you have to be in the building to get that. There are children who have such disabilities such that they're not physically or developmentally capable of turning on their computer or using it. So that, to the extent that those kids are working remotely, that's super challenging. And then even away from those specifics, like if you think kind of more generally about the challenges that some special education students face, one classification is like attention deficit disorders or learning disorders, and those kids who maybe require a lot of redirecting in the classroom are now sitting at home with, you don't know the situation that they have at their house. There are kids who have auditory processing issues, and they lose all of those kind of cues in the classroom that might be helpful to them. And there are kids that need emotional support, and that's not just special education, but I would say disproportionately the children in special education are the ones who are like really relying on the people in the building who are there to help them, and to the extent that they're not in the building or there are differences in their routine, that can be hard for kids to get to. And then the third overarching thing I would say is that schools need to meet all of those challenges in the context of a very tightly regulated system. And there's been some flexibility added by the federal and state governments in terms of meeting children's IEPs, their individualized education plans. But in general, districts are still absolutely obligated to provide the children with what has been laid out for them. First of all, because that's the job of a school district. But second, because it is the law, like that's what they have to do. So it's very complicated, and that is taking up the time not only of schools, but certainly of parents of children with disabilities as well. Adria, I know that you talked for the story that we just ran to one parent in the Rochester City School District who had some kind of both specific concerns about her own child and then kind of general thoughts about it.
Yeah, so I spoke with Clara. When you read the story, you can read more about her. But some of the concerns that she shared with me were, one, her daughter was promoted to the 5th grade. Her daughter, Jayla, was promoted to the 5th grade, and she wasn't sure that that was the right decision. She wasn't consulted about it, and she was concerned about that happening. And she's very much concerned about Jayla regressing. So she's nonverbal. So Clara said that she hasn't been able to specifically express her concerns or her discomfort with online learning, but she has noted regression. So for instance, she said that she had incidences of urinating on herself, that she has done that like 3 times for the end of the last semester, continuing to now, when before they went online and she had only done it once. She also doesn't understand why she's having to meet her teachers and other students via a screen. She doesn't understand why everything's online now. And she's struggling with that. She said that it's difficult to get her up, difficult to get her even wanting to look at the screen for long periods of time. And so she's just very concerned about what this will look like going forward. She's hired actually a tutor to come 3 times a week. And she said that it's more expensive than she would like to do, but she needs to help Jayla not regress even more. She's taking her lunch breaks to go home and work with her daughter as often as she can. And I know you had a point about equity, because I mean, of course, that takes money to be able to hire someone. That takes a job that's flexible enough to allow her to go home for her lunch breaks.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, parental and family resources always play such an important role in education. And in a situation like this, where the ability of the school district itself to compensate has been greatly decreased, you get really huge equity gaps among families and in particular across districts. And that comes up all the time in Monroe County. The first thing to point out is that the need in terms of special education is deeply concentrated in the city. The rates of children with disabilities are about double what they are in a lot of the suburbs. So that just makes it an even bigger problem to start with. And then the money that it takes to meet those things. RCSD, of course, we know about the budget issues that it had last year. And even now the state is withholding or possibly cutting 20% of its state education aid, which on the surface would cut equally in all districts, but RCSD, because it doesn't have a local tax base of its own, relies much more heavily on that funding than suburban districts. So it is looking at cutting a fifth of its budget in the next month or two, whereas in the suburban districts, it might be between 5 or 10% that they have to cut. In all situations, that's a lot of money, but really in RCSD that already has cut down to the bone and has these even greater needs that it needs to meet in terms of special education is a huge challenge. And the biggest challenge of all, of course, is that RCSD is fully remote, which makes it unique in Monroe County, but similar to other large school districts throughout the country. Urban districts just have a much harder time with the logistics of being at least partially in class. So, you know, the kids like Jayla, who would benefit from every single bit of help they can get, will have less of it, and the challenge for the districts to educate them will be even greater because they won't be in school even a little while.
What solutions are in place, or
Yeah. So, I mean, of course, there are different ideas. You know, people have been working hard on this all summer. I think one of them for kids that can't use the computers as well, or who don't have a parent to help them throughout the day, is to give them work that either can be done on paper or can be done later on, maybe when the parents get off of work. Some of the districts, I talked to the leader of the special education parent group in Penfield, and they said they were working on having a specific support unit for parents of children who are choosing to do full remote. Because of course, even in the suburban districts where they're offering some in person, there are a lot of parents who are choosing not to do that for health reasons. RCSD, I thought a very good idea. So if you think of like an occupational therapist who would be working with a kid, instead of just saying, we'll try and do it online as best we can, they are looking into having kind of a clinical setting at like the city recreation centers, where that occupational therapist will be at say the Gant Rec Center all day long, and kids will come in just as they would at like a doctor's office for a 15-minute appointment to get the services they need. I thought that was a pretty innovative thing. But, you know, the biggest thing, just as in a regular school setting, is it's really going to be incumbent on the teachers and the providers to be checking in with the kids as best as they can. They're not going to be able to overcome all of these difficulties. You know, you mentioned regression earlier. That's a super important topic for special ed in particular. You know, like a regular kid, if they miss a few months of school, that's not great, but they kind of, you know, can pick it up later as best they can. But when there are children who are not only kind of coasting in that time, but like literally losing developmental capacity or physical capacity, that makes it a much greater challenge. So the more that the teachers and the schools and the providers can do some checking in with these kids will certainly be important, and something that we'll be looking at as we go forward in the school year.
Well, that's my last question. Thank you for taking this time today, Justin. If anyone has questions, we have like 1 minute for people who are watching to be able to drop questions into the chat. So I'll
Yeah.
take it.
And I see somebody here says tutors are 50 to 75 bucks an hour, and that is absolutely true. I can't say that if I had a child with a disability in school, I would be in a position to give hundreds of dollars a day to get services. Of course, if you have a parent who's available, then they can do some of that. It's not, specialized, of course, but that is what happens when the systems that we all choose to educate our children across the county have different capacities to do that job.
Someone asked if there's a way to volunteer to help city students. Do you know of any ways?
No, not really. It's kind of a unique situation. Normally, you might say call the school and they would offer to have you come in and do whatever it is that they need to do, but that's not really the way it works right now. I would say that doing whatever advocacy you can at for instance, the school board level in terms of being able to provide resources, or even more so the state and federal levels. Ultimately, people always like to say that throwing money at things doesn't solve problems, but it does solve some problems. And not having staff to work with these children is a problem that can be solved with money. I know that the state and federal delegations are working on that, but it hasn't really trickled down yet. So, but in terms of assisting a specific child, unless you happen to know one and provide help to the family, that is a hard question to answer.
Well, thanks for your time, Justin, and thanks to everyone who tuned in.